Thank you. The evening of February 4th, 2015, Lisa and Ian Trebekova, a married couple serving their country in the United States Coast Guard, returned home to go to bed. It was a night like any other night, the evidence will show. Only at about 1:30 in the morning of February 5th of 2015, it became a very different night. The evidence will show that at that time, Adrian Loya blasted his way using a shotgun, 2 rounds fired, through the front door of 11 Meeting House Road, where they live in Bourne. He scaled the steps up to their second-floor bedroom, discarded the shotgun he used to gain entrance, and entered the bedroom where they had been sleeping. He had on his person at that time a handgun and a rifle. The rifle discharged at least 1 round while he was there, and the handgun discharged at least 15 rounds, 11 of which hit and eventually killed Lisa Trebekova. Anna Trebekova was hit or wounded at least 4 separate times. In the arm, in the chest, in the thigh, in one that shattered her humerus, which is also very harmful. Now, my name is Brian Glennie, as I said to you before. With me is Michael Donovan, and also assisting us is going to be Sean Hatchell from the State Police with the introduction of the evidence in this case.
15.
This is the opportunity that I have to address you and give you a major outline of what I expect the evidence in this case will show. Nothing that I'm going to say is evidence in the case. The evidence has to come in through the witness. But the way that this case will unfold for you will be through the witnesses. And some of the witnesses may have a very big part in one aspect of the case, and a minor part in a different aspect of the case. So you're going to have to wait until all of the evidence is presented to you to be able to put it all together. And that's one of the reasons the judge had told you before, don't draw any conclusions until after you've heard all of the evidence, because some of the witnesses just won't be in a position to tell you about what happened at one scene, or they'll tell you just bits of what happened at one scene, but they'll be in a great position to tell you about what happened at a different scene. Now, the evidence in this case will show that in the early morning hours of February 5th of 2015, the birthday of Adrian Loya, he went to 11 Roundhouse Road. But before he got to 11 Roundhouse Road, you're going to learn that Roundhouse Road is basically a development of houses, and that there's a singular entry and exit way, and then it's a circle. And that he took his car, which was a Mazda, parked it across the roadway, and set it on fire. And that the intention, the evidence will show, for doing that was to delay the police response to the scene. The evidence will also show, I should say, that a device was left near the car at that same location, the way in or out, to look like a bomb. And you'll see pictures of that, and you'll even see parts of the device over here, because obviously the police took it apart to make sure that it wasn't in fact a bomb. And it wasn't a bomb. It was a hoax device. You hear that he also took a rifle and placed it under the deck of a house near this area, 21 Roundhouse Road. Now you hear that at this time, February 2nd of 2015, it was a snowy area. It wasn't snowing that night, but there had been snow on the ground. All right? You hear that he went, and right in front of where 11 Roundhouse Road is, where Lisa and Anna lived, under their mailbox, which was a developmental, there's a mailbox for all of those units in that one part of the development, he put what would be the boombox, I would suggest to the colloquial way we describe it as a boombox, which had a radio and an iPod or an iPad or something, anyhow, a device that can play songs, that he had put certain songs on, battle tunes, as he would describe it. But this also had wires to make it look like if it had been, were to be moved, it would explode. You'll also hear that he left other devices around the entire roundhouse area. Again, to slow the police response for what he was going to do. You hear, as I described to you, how he entered the house, how he climbed up the stairs, threw the rifle, the shotgun down, went in, and revealed himself. You hear that he knew these two individuals, and they knew him, because he also was in the Coast Guard. And they had served together when they were stationed in Kodiak, Alaska. You'll hear that he was, at that point, basically demanding that they apologize, and that they were profusely apologizing. You'll hear that this wasn't enough, though. You hear that he stepped from the room, and at that time, the two women grabbed the mattress that was on the bed in order to try to protect themselves, to hide behind it. He came back in, and he shot 15 times from the handgun, 11 rounds of which were to enter the body of Lisa Covey. And I told you about the 4 times that Anna was wounded. He then left. You hear how he was dressed, how he had battle fatigues on, how he had a number of large capacity magazines on the belt that he was wearing. You'll hear he had a knife on the belt. You'll hear how, after he left, that Lisa had already tried to call 911 on her phone. So that line had already been established. And that how Anna then tried to communicate with the 911 service. And you were able to hear what was going on at that time while she was trying to do that. You'll hear that Mr. Loya, having left the room, 11 Roundhouse, then begins to go and make his way around the Roundhouse Road circuit. You hear there were things discarded at different places. There would be some handcuffs, and the handcuffs would be the type that were the Ziploc kind of handcuffs. You hear that there were other devices that were left around the area. You hear that he ended up at 77 Roundhouse Road, which the way that Roundhouse Road is designed is the so-called high ground. You hear the police were dispatched, and the fire department were dispatched. And at that time, the police didn't know if there was 1 shooter, 2 shooters, 3 shooters. Now they began to try to get around the burning car to assist, and who was on the phone with the 911 operator, begging for them to come and help her. You hear how the police would split up. 2 went one way, 2 went the other way to get around the car. And that as while the police were approaching an area near 77, a parking lot down on the ground, which would be below where Mr. Loya was, he began to open fire at them. And that he hit police officer from Bourne, Jared McDonald, in the lower back. You hear what the police had to do to get Mr. McDonald out from that scene into an ambulance. And you hear how the police also had to get to 11 Roundhouse to care for Anna. Anna survived, and she'll be here and she'll tell you her observations about what happened. You hear how Mr. Loya eventually discards at 71 Roundhouse Road basically the weapons that he had with him at that time, which included a rifle, a handgun, a number of clips that were high capacity, in other words, held more than 10 rounds, knife, and such things, and then walked out in order to turn himself in. And you'll hear that he also took off a GoPro device. And I say GoPro, yes, I would say Coca-Cola Kleenex. I think it was actually a movie, but it was a camera in which he could record. No audio, just video about what happened. And you're going to be able to see that. And that it was working when he was in the bedroom. But you're not going to be able to see everything that you'd want to be able to see that would tell you everything that happened, because whenever he had his hands out with the gun, his arms would be blocking the view of the camera. But you'll be able to see enough, I suggest, to get a good idea of what was going on. You'll hear that he eventually walked down the street and turned himself in, and was arrested by the police. And you'll hear about what was found on his person. He was taken into custody. You hear he was brought to the Bourne police station, and he was interviewed. And you're going to hear about what he says during that interview. You're going to hear how he admits that he did this, and he's going to tell you why he committed this crime. This was really a revenge killing against Lisa Travis. And you're going to hear about a supposed incident that happened in Kodiak, Alaska, where Mr. Loya, and the only evidence I would suggest to you that comes from this would be from Mr. Loya, claims that he was sexually assaulted, and you'll hear what he is saying his sexual assault is, and that he held a grudge pretty much from that point onward, and that he had targeted her. You'll hear that in October of 2014, that once Mr. Loya, you'll hear that, I'm sorry, to step back a bit, you'll hear that they were stationed in Kodiak, and eventually they were transferred to other places. That Lisa and Anna were transferred to Cape Cod. Mr. Loya was transferred to Virginia. And that he found out where Lisa and Anna were living through use of the internet and such. And that he got online, and he went to some, I believe it's called Zillow, a service that's offered online, and was able to see the room layout of the room that 11 Roundhouse Road was. In other words, it's like a virtual tour of these units that would have been exactly the same as where they lived. You'll hear that he came up in October, stayed at the Quality Inn in Bourne, went to 11 Roundhouse in that area and set up a deer camp out in front on a tree in the early morning hours, unseen by anybody as far as we know. You'll hear that he went back and retrieved the deer camp to ensure that that is where they were living. That there were pictures of them coming from that house, that apartment. That he went back to Virginia. And on the way back to Virginia, you hear that he pulled over someplace in Pennsylvania. And while in Pennsylvania, he's walking in a field off the highway. And he's filming this with his camera, with his phone. And you'll see this video. And he's going to say into the video that he's contemplating, should he go through with this mission? Should he do this or should he not? And he's going to say, I've thought about this. And if I don't do it, here's what's going to happen to me. They're going to drum me out of the Coast Guard. They're going to say I'm crazy. I don't want to get drummed out of the Coast Guard. And then he chooses to go ahead. And that he does, in fact, go ahead with it in February of 2015. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I said before, you need to keep an open mind. You need to wait until all of the evidence is in before you make a determination about whether or not there has been proof beyond a reasonable doubt or there hasn't been proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I ask you to do just that. At the end of the case, I'll be able to address you again and give an argument about the evidence that you've heard. So until then, though, please keep an open mind. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Attorney Segadelli, please.
Folks, good afternoon.
Oh, he means witnesses.
Spent a few days together once again. I'm Bruce Segadelli, and I'm here on behalf of Adrian Loya. Being a part of what we did the last few days, you saw the pains we take in the impalement process. The theory behind that obviously is we want to seek you heard the judge use the impartial jurors. We likewise would like to believe that the preconceived bias or prejudice are essentially left at the courthouse steps. But we don't ask any jurors ever to set aside their common sense. Like Mr. Glennie, his honor, told you about keeping the open mind, I will likewise do the same thing. But I will ask you throughout the trial to still utilize your common sense and exercise that. Gain through life's experiences. Now, it's a challenging case. We're going to be applying the same principles of law and so forth as one would in a trespassing case or a capital case of this nature. But it is still challenging. And as we all know, utilizing common sense, and or the judge will tell you eventually that the Commonwealth, and you've all heard this, bears that burden of proving the case. That proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And I'll just submit to you early because we're not arguing now, we're just hopefully helping you. But it is a significant burden. You heard somewhat in the impalement process that it isn't only proving beyond a reasonable doubt that that fellow did these terrible, tragic acts. It's not only that, but they also must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that at the time of this conduct, that he, as a result of mental disease or defect, did not appreciate the wrongfulness of his conduct, or that he could not conform his conduct to the requirements of law. I'll submit to you, some people use the expressions, who done it? Though this isn't the case, you're going to see an abundance of evidence, a great majority of which came from that fellow, my client, as he wrote a 265-page document about this plan, as he wrote letters to Lisa, some 23 pages before this event. You're going to hear that some of this plan, or this planned mission, could have gone as long as 16 months, the planning stages, that it was meticulously planned, meticulously detailed in each and every nature of it. Listen for that. Not only that, what he left in the paperwork, but when speaking with the police officers on 2 different occasions for hours. And you'll have the opportunity to hear that. And I'd ask you to pay particular attention, not only to the acts that occurred on his birthday, somewhat unusual, February the 5th, 2015, his 31st birthday, but the specific detail in the 265 pages, in the detailing it to the police, because I'm going to suggest to you that's all going to line in to his disease of defect. That's not the legal label. It ultimately will be for you, but how do we go there? Now, keep in mind, as the judge has instructed you, the defendant doesn't have to do anything. Why is that? As the judge told you, he is presumed innocent. But I think the evidence is going to show you and lead you down a particular path. And we have witnesses, I anticipate you'll hear from witnesses in this case. And some use the expression expert witness. That's really when you become the judges. It will be for you to determine whether or not you accept or exclude. They're not given any grace because they're termed this or they have a particular profession that could help give credence to their opinions. But you'll hear from I anticipate you'll hear from a Dr. Daniel. Let me step back. Experts, as one utilizing common sense could assume, they base their opinion on their database or the accumulation of all the information they can utilize to draw their conclusions. Well, you'll hear from Dr. Daniel and you'll hear everything he utilized to form his opinion. Not only were there police reports and a 265-page document and police reports speaking to collateral families, speaking to the Coast Guard and their investigation, speaking to the lawyers perhaps, he spent some 43 hours, the evidence will show you, with Mr. Loya. Some 43 hours. And he's going to suggest to you that he suffers from a significant mental disease or defect that both deprived him of the ability to conform his conduct to the requirements of law. And we go with that, what's called the McCool standard, appreciate wrongfulness, conform conduct. He's going to suggest to you, and that standard, ladies and gentlemen, is given to us in the alternative. So it's not and, it's appreciate wrongfulness or conform conduct to the requirements of law. Dr. Daniel, after spending all that time, and you have the ability to praise him like us. You'll also hear from, and I'd submit to you, Dr. Daniel has a significant amount of experience, but you'll also hear from a Dr. Martin Kelly, who has a long history in testifying and so forth. You may hear such evidence that he has testified in some 300 to 400 cases. That he was originally hired. The court eventually asked him to speak to Mr. Loya, and he spent better than 9 hours with Mr. Loya. And pursuant to his training and his experience, he's a psychiatrist. He said, somewhat of a different label, where Dr. Daniel gives some type of delusional label, but it's a significant mental disease or defect. Dr. Martin Kelly suggests that it's on the autism spectrum, in fact, perhaps a high-functioning Asperger's. And because of that, and likewise, he suffered from a delusional base on that particular day. We're focusing on that day, February 5th, because it's at the time the conduct is committed, that he could not, Dr. Kelly could not conform to the requirements of law because he was in a delusion. In fact, it was in his mind, Dr. Kelly, I believe the evidence will show, it was a good against evil scenario. You're going to hear what was occurring in his head in that particular day. That's why I said it's a challenge. This case is going to be a challenge. It's not the whodunit, but one has to look seriously at this testimony about what was going on. What was he doing in the planning stages? What caused him? What motivated him to do all this? And what was it as a result of? You're going to hear from there's a Dr. Holtzman, I believe, who works for the state. Not wholly convinced of a mental disease or defect that would give or deprive somebody of the ability to conform their conduct. But one would also look to, and the evidence may show you that Dr. Holtzman didn't have that database I talked about, police reports. I don't think he had the ability to see Dr. Kelly and Dr. Daniels' reports. So one might suggest his foundation was not sound enough. Eventually hired years after this, and I would just submit to you at this time an opening statement. Most important time is the event sometime after 2 a.m. on February the 5th. In fact, the first call came into 911 at 2:11. Mr. Loya was taken into custody at 2:48, so there's roughly 36 minutes that's involved here that we're going to be looking at and asking you to keep an eye on. But you're eventually going to hear, I believe the evidence is going to show you, you're going to hear from a Dr. Ida Schein, who was eventually hired to give an opinion. And she gave an opinion. Once again, I'd ask you to look at what type of database did she have. She had a period of better than 8 months to go and visit and see Mr. Loya. One would hope to assist her in her evaluation of him. She never took that opportunity. But in light of that, she'll suggest to you he could conform, but he doesn't meet the standard. I can say that. I'd ask you to keep an open mind, as the judge will tell you. That's ultimately up to you. Those folks, even if they're labeled the experts of the idea, it's going to be up to you, ladies and gentlemen, to make that determination. And she never, Dr. Ardisha never availed herself of that. Again, the whodunit aspect, keep an eye on where it came from. Vast majority of it, Mr. Loya, because it's part of that delusional phase we're starting with. And I'll eventually ask you to look, when you deliberate, look at all of that evidence to see that first aspect of that burden that Mr. Glennie has to carry from start to finish. Yeah, I want to go and get over that first hurdle. But the second, at the time, and that's why it's such a challenge, at the time that he could conform himself, that he appreciated the wrongfulness, and I would submit to you at this stage that he could not. And after that challenge, one will submit that the Commonwealth could not get over that burden of proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. Thank you.